Yeah, I'm going, so let's go. Let's check the levels here. Sorry, normally I would do this beforehand, but it's off the cuff, baby. It's off the. There we go. Levels are good. Yeah, I wanted to talk today about how capitalism creates poor leadership. And I want to preface this with a disclaimer and say that I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I believe that the pitfalls of capitalism are pretty obvious in a lot of ways, but I also think a lot of good has come from it. I don't think we would have had some of there's a reason why American movies, American music are what they are. And I do think that is tied to capitalism, and that's a topic for another time. So I'll just keep it simple and say that I believe good a lot of great products have come as a result of capitalism, a lot of great innovation, a lot of bad innovation as well, quote unquote innovation. But I'm not going to just sit here and say that capitalism is inherently bad or everything about it is bad. And if you know me, you know I ain't no commie. You know I ain't no commie. And disclaimers are important. Disclaimers are very capitalistic because people don't want to get sued. They don't want to have to give up their money, lose their reputation, and by losing their reputation, lose even more money. Losing even more money. A friend of mine once told me your reputation will become your currency. My friend Tim told me that, and I immediately wrote it down. It was profound. I don't believe he came up with the quote, but I'll still credit him with being the messenger. And I think it's kind of fitting that I'm drinking a Starbucks here. And before you judge me for drinking a Starbuck, it's called Starbucks, so we should call this a Starbuck. I'm drinking a Starbuck because they're called Starbucks. That's what they have. They have Starbucks, so it's a Starbuck. I have a gift card, okay? Somebody gave me a gift card. But it's kind of perfect. Talking about capitalism, drinking Starbucks, I enjoy it. So, capitalism creates poor leadership. It does. And think about a business. You think about the way a business is run or any kind of organization where money is a large factor in the way that decisions are made. And you have a lot of people in this world who want promotions or are willing to accept promotions. And the main incentive is more money. Sure, there's a certain amount of prestige, there's a certain amount of power. Some people want to be able to say they're a boss, they want to be able to say that. But the bigger incentive is money. So you have people who otherwise have no leadership qualities. Maybe they've just played the system really well at the organization they're in. They've followed orders the right way. So their boss is like, I'm going to give you a promotion because you've done everything you said, which isn't really being a leader necessarily. If you've just followed, I think a leader needs to be able to follow orders, but people are often promoted for reasons other than leadership, and they accept those promotions because they want more money. So you can see where there's a fault line in that almost immediately. You have extremely insecure people who lack natural leadership, and I don't think you have to have natural leadership qualities to be a leader. But I do think it's extremely important, and you at least have to have gone down certain roads in your mind, whether you've been down them or not. I think some people maybe are natural born, but you have people who are extremely insecure in positions of leadership because they want more money. And when someone's insecure, that's basically a landmine of anxiety. It creates anxiety. They're going to be filled with anxiety and constantly be measuring themselves. That's not the right way to put it. They're going to be just constantly measuring themselves, like from the perspective of someone who doesn't feel like they deserve to be a leader, or that they don't have the right qualities. And being insecure is different from being afraid or fearful, because my personal belief is that a leader is fearful because there's so much to be afraid of out there in any situation. The world is scary. It's truly fucking scary on an emotional level, on a physical level. There's a lot to fear out there. And if you're not afraid, I don't think you can be a good leader, because a good leader knows there is always a lot to lose. In a business, that means losing money, losing employees, losing credibility. Running a business is scary, and I don't think running a business is a bad thing. I may be criticizing an element of capitalism, but we're in a capitalist society and people have to run businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that fear because you want to, that fear should also be, because it's not just your own fear. If you're a leader, it's not just your own fear that is coming into play. You have to be afraid for other people. And you think about, let's say, military, something that I'm not qualified to talk about. But still, it's like you have other people's lives depending on you. Literally, their lives depend on you. They will die horrible deaths because you flinched. And in a business or a similar sort of organization that is otherwise, dependent on money, it's not so much, the people won't, their lives don't depend on it like they would if they were at war or anything like that. But they do depend on you to live. If they have children, they need money. They need money to live. They spend so many hours working for said business that a large chunk of their life is dedicated to that. So their lives do depend on you in so many ways. Their mental health, their ability to eat food, to buy the food they need, to live in a house. That's all dependent on you. So that places a heavy burden on any leader. And so a leader should be afraid, but they should not be insecure, because insecurity will, like I said, create just an explosion of anxiety. And that is just the complete opposite of what leadership should be about. But yet many so-called leaders think that by creating anxiety in those under them and around them, that they'll have more control. And that's bullshit. That's bullshit on their part. You hear that? I swear this phone thing is going to haunt me. If you watched the last episode, my phone was going off, and I went on a tangent about that. But it plays into politics a lot, and I'm not going to get into politics too much. You can see where money plays a role in politics, and obviously we don't have great leaders in politics on all sides. This isn't a reference to January 20th, 2017 or November 2016, whatever you want to say. This goes back much farther, and it's just part of, how much of that is capitalism or just the nature of politics in general. They kind of bleed into one another, but I don't really want to get into that. This is more psychological than it is political. And one of the issues I have with well, here, let's put it this way. One of my passions is studying the Italian-American mafia. And I don't talk about it a lot with people because it's sort of this secret autistic interest of mine. When I was in college, I studied sociology, and one of my focuses was on the mafia. And since then, in my personal life, I spend a lot of my free time, a lot of my relaxation time studying it. I've read many books. I regularly go through FBI records, genealogical records. Like I said, it's just some weird secret autistic thing that I'm into, and I'm not autistic, so therefore I'm being so offensive. He's using autism as a metaphor, and I don't like it. But it feels very autistic. Like if I get stoned and I'm going through like old genealogical records of guys, obscure mafia members who have been dead, and trying to figure out like where their fathers came from so that I can connect them to this village. And I have friends I've made through that, not in person. And speaking of like spreading myself too thin, a friend of mine that I talk to pretty regularly wants to work on some projects. He's a really accomplished researcher, and it's his main thing is this stuff, is the mafia stuff. And he wants to work with me on it. And I'm like, yeah. And let me just say that too, overcommitting to things is a major problem for me. And I mentioned before that I spread myself too thin. But I think the upside of that is that if I didn't overcommit and if I didn't spread myself thin, I wouldn't be nearly as productive. So while I may not be able to meet all of my commitments all the time, or I may take my time like the tortoise, I always get there, I end up getting a lot more done in the end because I did overcommit. So it's sort of it's tough. It's hard on the brain, because you constantly feel like you're not doing as much as you should. But anyway, my point bringing up the mafia is I think they're a great example of the exact point I'm making of leadership and the mafia. I'm getting some kind of static here. I'm not sure what the story is. The electricity in this house is god awful, and I feel like it like runs through all my equipment and fucks it up. I don't know. Oh well, you got a little static here. You can deal with it, but it is frustrating. But yeah, with the mafia, I think you can see that because the mafia is not a good group of guys. So I'm not about to justify the mafia's existence, but you do have to keep in mind that when they were created and whatever, we don't know exactly when the mafia was created in Sicily and all that, but it was a product of sort of a medieval feudal society, and there were a lot of invaders in old Sicily, so it was a brutal time. It was a brutal time, and as a result, the mafia is a very brutal thing. And the mafia is the original mafia coming up in old Sicily is basically designed to give its organization as much of an advantage as possible. The members of its organization. It's essentially it's not necessarily based on money, but we know that money gives an advantage. And then it moved over to America, and that's a whole topic for another time. But in America, with the Italian American mafia, you continually hear, even in pop culture, how capitalism has changed the mafia. It's made the leaders greedy. You hear it about the guys who have turned government witness say, used to be about honor. I shouldn't actually do an accurate voice because I should do it. Used to be about honor. Being in the mafia used to be about honor, and now it's all about making money and giving the boss some money, and they're just so greedy. The bosses are so greedy. That's how mafia members sound, turns out. But you can see where it's done the same thing to the mafia that it's done. So and you can see where capitalism is the umbrella over all this stuff, whether it's a legitimate business or an illegitimate business, organized crime. You can see where capitalism has influenced that. So there is a very destructive influence to capitalism when it comes to having proper leadership, and it's changed the way that we approach it. Kids want to become powerful. Kids want to grow up and be able to say, I'm a this, I'm a that. But one of the big incentives is money and image too, and that image is influenced by money because they want to have nice things. They want to wear a nice suit. You want to look like this. You want to look like that. You want to come across a certain way, but it's largely based on making money and appearances. And I don't really know what to do about that. I think it's too late to actually do anything about that. But I think that if you're in a leadership position and you're listening to this and you feel attacked or not like personally attacking, because this is not about anybody or anything like that. But I have, I've been around the block for a couple years, and I've just seen enough of this to know that this is a major issue, and it makes working miserable. That's the thing. Work is hard. On one hand, you're providing people with a living, which is awesome. It is awesome if you give people jobs and you provide people with a living. But at the same time, you're also gaining from them. They're working for you. They're doing something for you. And if you in return give them anxiety or you spread your insecurity among them, you're doing them a great disservice, and you're damaging yourself. You're damaging your business. You're damaging your organization. So my suggestion would be, before you accept that promotion, really think about whether you want it or not. The only time I was in a formal leadership position was when I worked for the census and the 2010 census, and I was 24. Yeah, I was 24, and I'd worked as a clerk for about 7 months for them, and then one of the office operations supervisors, OOS, everything's an acronym, so that position was spelled OOS, and they pronounced it OOS, which was perfect. So they wanted to promote me to ooze. I love it. See, that's the kind of status I want. I don't want to be able to say, I'm a. I don't even know. I don't even know what positions are called anymore in companies. But a chief financial officer. I don't want to be a chief financial officer. I want to be an ooze, and I was an ooze. That's my big bragging point. And they sat me down, and they were my boss. She was like, so-and-so is leaving, and I'm thinking I want to promote you to that spot. And I was kind of taken aback because I was one of the younger people, and this sounds very masturbatory, but I really just kind of fell into it. and involved a little pay bump. So I mean, my incentive was more money because honestly, if I were to be paid the same amount to stay where I was at, to stay a clerk, I would have stayed a clerk because I had no interest in the stress and anxiety of being an ooze, of oozing. But I accepted it because I wanted more money and it sounded interesting, and it was difficult. It was stressful, but I honestly feel like I did well with it, considering the circumstances. I think the only part that I struggled with was the age difference because many of the employees were retired. Working for the census, it's a temporary job. It lasts a couple years because I'd worked in the field before that. So there are a number of positions. There's different phases of it. So it's not like it doesn't. Or it was 2009. So I was actually 23. That's right. I was 23 at the time. And because they conduct the census, it starts the year before. I can't remember, man. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? I'm splitting hairs. Split hairs. Don't care. But anyway, like I was promoted, and it was hard just because I'm dealing with people. Like one of the guys who worked under me, who reported directly to me, he was a retired guy who he had flown helicopters in Vietnam, and here he is listening to a 23-year-old kid barking orders. I was barking orders at him. No, he was great. That guy ended up being kind of like my confidant, and leaders need confidants because leaders have to achieve a certain level of space. A leader has to have space between themselves and the people under them. There has to be a level of trust and camaraderie, but there also has to be space. You can't be overexposed because we're all human. We have faults, and when you see your leader's faults, when you see your leader's insecurities, because that's the thing. No matter what, you're going to have insecurities. It's more about exposing your insecurities than it is like having them. I should have said that earlier. I should have said it, but I hadn't even thought it. I just thought it now. Here comes that staticky noise. It's my thoughts. It's psychic dissonance coming in here, and who knows if you'll be able to hear it. It might just be in the headphones or something. I'm going crazy. I'm hearing static. There's static everywhere. White noise. I'm just... But this guy, his name was Mike, the former helicopter pilot. He had a mustache, glasses, probably like late 50s. I think he'd retired early or something. And I remember, like, I really wanted that guy's approval, as a leader. And he was fucking awesome. I could ask that guy to do anything, and he would do it. Other people were whiny as fuck, and I was, I remember this one guy, Trace, and he had a hearing aid, but he would turn his hearing aid down when he didn't want to, like, listen to you. And I think he had done too much LSD in the 70s or 80s. He looked like that guy... If you've ever seen Richard Scarry, the world, like I think the Richard Scarry books, but I'm thinking of the cartoon, the worm guy who drives the little Apple car, he looked like the human version of the worm guy. And Trace, I remember like I was in charge of scheduling people, and I put the schedule up on the board, and he walks over and looks at it, and I'm standing right there, and he looks at it for a second, and he goes, and this is a pretty accurate, I'm not doing one of my voices here when I do this. This is actually how he sounded. He goes, "Oh no!" And I go, "What?" Because everybody was sick of him at that point. And one of my other supervisors actually said to him at one point, "I think you turn your hearing aid down when you don't like what you're hearing." And that's a very bad thing to say to an employee for legal reasons, but there was some truth to that. But anyway, he goes, "Oh no!" And I go, "What is it?" And he goes, "You scheduled me for Friday, or I was going to go see Toy Story at the drive-in theater on Friday." And I go, "Do you really have to go see it that day?" I mean, we were under a lot of pressure to get stuff done. It was near the end of operations, and we were under a lot of pressure to get things done. And I was just like, "Oh, God." And then I was like, "Do you want me to swap you with somebody? I can find somebody." Because everybody else was pretty cool. They wanted the money. There was a lot of overtime because we were working around the clock. We ended up having 3 shifts. It was literally a 24-hour operation at one point when the census was underway. And I was like, "I can swap you with somebody else," and I did. And then that Monday he comes in, and I go, and of course I was being a little bit of an asshole, and he couldn't pick up on like facetiousness and my asshole sense of humor. But I went up to him and I was like, "How was Toy Story?" And he goes, "You know what?" He's like, "There was a problem with with the radio, because I think you like tuned in through the radio because it was a drive-in theater. I can't remember. I haven't been to a drive-in theater in maybe forever. I don't know if I've ever been to one, maybe since I was a little kid. But it was like there was a problem with the radio. It was only coming out of the left side, and I couldn't really see it. And because he's one of those guys who just complained about everything, and I'm just like, God damn it. As his boss, I was just like, God damn it. It's like I went to the trouble to like switch his schedule so he could go see Toy Story, and he didn't even enjoy it. It's like I would have, if he had come in and be like, man, it was so good. I loved every second. When Woody fell down off that thing, when Buzz Lightyear shot up through the air, I fucking loved it. You know, if he'd come in like that, I would have felt good about having done him that favor, but he hated it. He hated the experience because he's a miserable guy or something like that. I don't know. I feel like I'm being extra hard on him. He's probably had a tough life and he's like deaf. See, I don't know. Whatever. I'm not going to go on about that. But anyway, that was a good experience. But with going back to Mike, let's go back to the good guy. Mike, he kind of became my confidant, and I really wanted to earn his respect as a leader because that guy had been in the shit, literally the shit, fucking Vietnam in a helicopter. Who knows who that guy had killed? Who knows who had shot at that guy? I don't remember in what capacity. I think he'd been a pilot, so he'd seen some shit. That's the point. And I remember I knew when I had earned Mike's respect because there was this one day where like the leaders and my leaders, like my immediate boss, I liked her. She was this white trash lady who screamed and threw things, but I really liked her. And that's funny because I've had bosses who are really quiet and passive, but they're really passive aggressive, and I hated working for them. But with this, like she was like really outwardly toxic, but I liked it. You knew where she stood on things, and that's another thing. So it's like, if someone's kind of like aggro and they're your boss, that's not necessarily bad. It's like it really comes down to where their heart's at. But anyway, it wasn't her, but the people above her, like the people who were running the census on a state level, who would come into the office every once in a while, they would like dump shit on you at the last minute or change their minds, and you're already running at like, you know, a breakneck pace to get things done, and quality slipping and all that. And they would dump one day they dumped this last minute thing, or they were like, oh, the way we told you to do it before, the way we told you to organize all the binders before was wrong, and now you have to redo it in the opposite way. And I remember I went over to Mike and I was like, yeah, they want us to do it this way. And I remember he goes, what did he say? He goes, Eric, he's like, what do they think they're doing with this shit? Or something like that. But the way he said shit, and he didn't swear at all. He was a really like quiet, soft-spoken guy. And like the second he said shit in this like hushed tone, I was like, I won his respect. Like this little kid, pretty much, like this guy I literally was not born when he was flying over Vietnam in a helicopter. And I won his respect in that moment. And I look at how happy I am right now. I still love it. I remember we exchanged email addresses on the last day of work, like a group of us did. And I remember his email address was like great creator at like whatever.com. And someone asked him about it because it sounded like great creator sounds like some weird like God freak. And they were like, great creator? It sounds like very culty and kind of ominous. And he was like, oh yeah, I came up with that because, my wife said I'm just really good at like being handy and just like improvising around the house and making things, which is like just fit that guy perfectly. And he didn't really talk like that, but I wanted to talk like that. Anyway, great creator. I could probably find his email address somewhere. Maybe it's on a scrap somewhere. Hey, Mike, remember me? I won your respect. But that was really big for me, and it was a struggle. There were ups and downs. Like I remember one time, there was this 18-year-old girl who worked there who, she was very old for her age. Like I thought she was a little bit older and stuff, and she was very mature. But she had just graduated high school. Like she had literally just graduated. I think this was like her first real job, not serving ice cream. And there was this other guy who worked there who was in his mid-40s, who was an artist, a sculptor, and all this bullshit. And it really was kind of like bullshit art. But he and I got along really well initially because we were both creative people, and kind of like we kind of found the humor, and just like we both had to make cold calls initially when we started working, and we kind of would like call people and like put on our best like schmoozy voice just to get through the horror of making cold calls for the government. And but he started hitting on this 18-year-old girl. Like, he was like almost 30 years older than her. And not that that matters that much, but still, I mean, like, I noticed it one time because he worked at a local theater where he got free tickets, like a volunteer theater, a cool theater. And I remember he'll probably end up watching this somehow. No, I'm not connected to him at all. Although later I found out he was my ex-girlfriend's first landlord. But anyway, like, he got like free tickets to this theater. And I remember one time he would talk to the girl a lot. Like, he wasn't blatantly hitting on her at first, but he would talk to her a lot. And I remember he was like, yeah, he's like, I volunteer at the theater. And I get free tickets, but I have no one to take. And I remember I heard that and just, the cringe, I just cringed. It was just like, oh God, you're too old to be talking to an 18-year-old girl like that, or anybody like that. I didn't really think much of it, though. It seemed fairly harmless. But then a couple weeks later, she came to me privately with another girl. And she was like, hey, Eric, I almost said his name. I don't want to say his name. He won't, he won't leave me alone. He keeps asking me to hang out. And I said, yeah, I kind of had witnessed something like that. And I said, I'll talk to him. And at that point, I'd received no training. I was asked to take a promotion and I took it, but I'd received no training on how to handle stuff. And there was a guidebook somewhere, but there was no time. I mean, I was literally doing stuff all day. It was stressful. So I couldn't go through the guidebook and really understand policy. And because I was friendly with him, he and I had gotten a beer and stuff like that. And we would chat. Like, I did like him. The thing is, he had an engaging personality as far as like coworkers go. And, but like I mentioned earlier, there were 3 different shifts. So there were a lot of people you wouldn't see if they were on a different shift. And I was working this shift where I had to start at 4 a.m. and end at noon. And he was on the shift that like started at, I don't know, like 4 p.m. and ended at midnight. So we didn't really have any crossover. And, but then finally, like, I think she had asked me that like on a Thursday, and then like Friday went by. I can't remember if we worked the weekends. And then finally I talked to him on Monday, and he came in and I go, hey, come talk to me in the side room. And I was like, hey, so-and-so came and talked to me. And she feels uncomfortable with the fact that you keep asking her to hang out and giving her a lot of attention. And his eyes got real big. He could tell he was caught. And it's one of those things where that is harassment. It is, by working definition. And if you're making somebody uncomfortable like that in a workplace, it is harassment. Sure, it's not, crass. He wasn't being crass or like super aggressive, but he was making her uncomfortable. And especially, she was someone who didn't have a lot of experience. So it was especially fucked up. And it was ridiculous of him too. He was bald. I mean, like, he had like a little tuft of hair like right here, and I'm balding. So like, I'm not getting down on bald guys, but still he was balding changes your your prospects depending on who you are. And he had this little tuft of hair, and he was like at least 45, and he was young for his age. Sure, he's a free spirit, but it's like he had no chances with this 18-year-old girl. But anyway, I just told him to cut it out. I was just like, so just cut it out. I was like, I'm not going to make a big deal. You're a smart guy. I trust you. In retrospect, that's not what I should have done, because something ended up coming up. Like later, like a day or two later, the girl came up to me again and she goes, have you talked to him? And I said, yeah, I talked to him yesterday. And I was like, has he bothered you since then? She said, no. And so the issue was dead. A couple days later, he leans over to me when we're like at our desks, and he's like, hey, Eric, you didn't do any paperwork about that, did you? This shows you where like people are weasels, because that shows you that he really knew that he was doing something wrong. And I was like, no. I was like, and this is where I was wrong. I should have done some paperwork. I should have told my supervisor, my boss, and I think she would have handled it right. But I did what I could, and it did stop it, but I really should have done some paperwork. And then later, at the end of operations, we saved like 2 people, and one of them was my buddy Mike. I'll use his name, but one of them was my buddy Mike, and another one was the girl who backed the other 18-year-old girl up. When the girl had come to me, that girl was with her and had been like, I've witnessed it too. It is harassment. And I was like, cool, a witness. But it was those two, and so we kept them because they were the best workers, and the rest of us were just supervisors. And there was one day where like a group of us supervisors were talking to our boss about just things that happen, and a female supervisor who was very liberal, very she'd gone to the same liberal ass hippie college I went to, and she was talking about how that girl had come to her with the same claim and how she didn't do anything about it. So when the girl came to me, I was actually the second supervisor she had come to, and this other woman hadn't done anything about it. And that woman was a very poor leader. She was a very poor leader, the other supervisor, not just because she didn't do anything about the harassment, but because there were just a lot of things. She was extremely insecure, and she should not have been in that position. And there were some other underhanded things she did. She was always nice to me. She didn't do anything to me. The one thing she did, though, was they actually wanted to promote me to this even higher level supervisor, a field operations supervisor, and I would have essentially done the same thing, but I would have been paid slightly higher because I would have had more direct contact with the people in the field. And because she had been working for the census slightly longer, they were going to give it to me, and she like raised a stink. So she did kind of do something to me, but she wanted the money. She wanted the money, man, but yet she was willing to take this higher promotion. Yet she didn't have what it took to do anything about the harassment. So she was talking about that, and then I waited, and I was like, I actually spoke to him about that, and and we talked about how it was like we felt like he was harmless and that kind of thing. And she actually said, this female supervisor actually said, she's like, I'm not surprised, he hit on her with the way she dresses, because she would wear, it was in the middle of summer and stuff, and she would wear tank tops. So it just shows you, though, that it's like these things aren't based around gender. You have people like that, like this woman who was, like I said, she was very far left, farther left than me, much farther. And yet she was like victim blaming. She was victim blaming and, and talking shit, she was basically talking shit. But the witness girl overheard this from the other room and reported it to the head of the whole census office. And we got called in, and she was like, why did you, she just came down on me. And she's like, why did you not report this? And I go, I was not trained. I was not trained, which is the God's honest truth. God's honest truth. It really was, though. And she goes, you're right. Fortunately, like I just looked her right in the eye. I said, I was not trained. She said, you're right. And then she said, who was it? Because we didn't use names when we were having this discussion. And I told her who, and she goes, oh, she's like, he was probably just being friendly. She had thought it was this kid who was actually gay, who was really close to that girl, the 18-year-old girl. There was this gay kid who was really close to her, and so he was always hanging around her and talking to her. And she had assumed that it was him because he was so close to her, and I guess she didn't know that he didn't like girls. And when she found out who it was, she was like, oh, well, he's just a nice guy. She probably like misinterpreted it. So it shows you like. And that was also kind of the reason why I didn't formalize the complaint. It was because I felt like he's just a nice guy, but I knew he was wrong, and so I did talk to him. It sucked. It sucked. It was a learning experience. And I did my best, and I'm not patting myself on the back in any way because I don't think I handled it as well as I could have. But it was weird to see, like, when people heard who it was, how they just kind of passed it off. And you think about when this stuff goes on. I didn't expect this to be, like, this deep thing into, like, the whole harassment, like, Me Too sort of thing. It is on my mind a lot as someone who, like, has, I don't know, like, that stuff wasn't a surprise to me because, like, I am close to a lot of women. I was raised by two women, like, my mom and older sister, and, like, I have a number of close female friends who I'm not trying to sleep with. That helps you listen to people, it turns out. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm hoping just to express my experience because I'm not perfect either. I've done creepy, weird stuff for sure. But just this formative experience and this like exercise in leadership was very interesting. And my whole point, though, is how capitalism fucks it up. But I didn't even expect to bring it up, but I was thinking about that other supervisor and how she took the promotion because she wanted more money. She wanted that money they were going to give to me. And she did not earn it. She absolutely did not earn it. And I've worked other places where I don't think people really deserved to be leaders because they were far too insecure. They were paralyzed by their own issues. But, and I don't say that from a critical point of view. I just say it, I don't know, because, people start businesses. And one of the reasons people start businesses is independence. My dad started a cheese business. He's in the cheese business. He's not anymore. He retired early because he wanted independence and he worked his ass off, retired early. But one reason is independence and financial freedom, and you have to work hard to achieve that. But a lot of people who start businesses start them for the wrong reasons, and that's like promoting yourself to a position. And I don't know, there are a lot of shortcomings based on the capitalist structure. And like I said, I have no faith in communism, socialism, any of that, and I won't go into it because honestly, I don't think my opinions are well researched enough to really say much. But based on my experience, based on being someone who's studied history, I think communism and socialism, we need something else. We need something else that takes the best qualities of all these different systems and, creates an amalgamation of them. That's what we need. But I'm focused on myself. I'm not qualified to tell the world what it needs. I'm not qualified to tell the world what kind of system is best. I'm just a human, and that's the funny thing, is we as humans think we're qualified to tell the entire world what it should do, yet we're not capable of even really guiding ourselves or telling ourselves what we should do. We're not capable of leading ourselves. That's essentially what it is. We're not really capable of even leading ourselves, yet we continually put ourselves in positions where we try to tell others what to do and lead others. We accept promotions, we seek promotions, and we're telling everything else how it should change and how it should work and this and that, yet we don't even know how we work. And that's like where I'm at. I'm trying to figure out how I work. And it's the process once again, and I feel extremely redundant because the last video ended with me just talking about how I'm in the process. You mean the process? I'm in the process of the process. I'm in the machine. I feel like because I was getting coffee and I had all these thoughts especially about capitalism that I was going to elaborate on, and I feel like I'm at a loss. I wasn't planning on talking about all those census experiences, but it was one of my only real experiences in a pure leadership position, and where I was exposed to good leadership and bad leadership. And I learned a lot from it, obviously. I learned a lot from it, and I try to apply those lessons. I don't know. I hope, you think about leadership class too. In high school, the kids who took leadership class were not fucking leaders. Maybe there were a few leaders among them, but they were not leaders, and they didn't teach kids to be leaders. Standing around in like a circle and catching each other like as they fall back, that's those trust games. And like I think of leadership class, like they learned how to like put on assemblies and like hold pep rallies. That's not leadership. That's not how you become a leader. That's how you just become going back to school. We're on a school night. It's actually morning. I think this is definitely the first school night TV I've ever done in the morning. And I don't believe I've ever done an every night's a school night at the podcast, which is on hiatus. But I don't believe I've ever done one of those in the morning, but it's night somewhere. And so it is a school night. Question leadership. You hear that a lot. Everyone's a rebel and they question leadership, question authority. You should question your own leadership of yourself. You should question your own authority over yourself. Figure your shit out. That's what you need to do before you can ever tell somebody else what to do. And I'm not telling you what to do. I'm talking to myself here. I'm talking to me. 0 views, baby. No, really. I know a few people do watch these. Do check them out. So thanks. Don't worry about being afraid. Don't worry about being afraid. Worry about being insecure. Because fear is based on the external, in my experience. If you're afraid of things outside of your control, external things, and that fear is what will drive you to prepare yourself better for those things. Insecurity won't. Insecurity will only undermine you. So you should be doing everything. And in order to prepare yourself to deal with those external fears, you have to deal with your own insecurity first. And on that note, just do it. Every episode is going to have a Nike slogan in it. And next thing you know, I'm going to be head to toe in Nike in these videos because I do want to get like a jogging suit. I feel like that's the next step for me is to get like a track suit with a swoosh. No, I'd rather have an off-brand one, go full Eastern European. There's something to be said for that fashion. There's something to be said for Eastern European fashion. Just not Eastern European political systems like communism. Peace.